Shovel Knight is one of the greatest indie success stories in the entire realm of video games, and if you're not familiar with it, how's that even possible? Have you not noticed by now that Shovel Knight is in like every video game? He's playable in Runbow, Road Redemption, Indivisible, Blaster Master Zero, Indiepogo, Rivals of Aether, Blade Strangers. Oh my god, he's so big. He's shown up in Azure Striker Gunvolt 2, Yooka-Laylee, Bloodstained. Oh my god, he's so big again. Some music remixes made it into Just Shapes and Beats. He's an assist trophy in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which is still a massive accomplishment for the studio. And the game Shovel Knight is on like every modern console, including the Vita and 3DS. This incredible tidal wave all started back on October 4th, 2013, when a random retro-inspired 2D platformer showed up on Kickstarter, back when that was still a relatively new thing. It blew past its initial financial goal, as well as all of its stretch goals, and well, the rest is history. A whole lot has changed in those last 6 years. Matter of fact, I did do a video on Shovel Knight back when it first came out, and taking a look back at it, yeah, a lot certainly has changed in the last 6 years. This was the best I can do at the time, I swear. Dude Views. Boy, can't imagine why that stupid name didn't take off. It took a long time to get here, but finally, Shovel Knight is fully completed. So why not we bookend that older review and take a look at the finished product. That's an idea that I can certainly dig. Well, for starters, now we have Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, a pretty appropriate name change to be honest. What initially was sold as being a simple, super solid throwback platformer influenced by the NES days, while also creating its own strong identity, has become, well, a treasure trove of content. So much has been added over the years, from minor tweaks to entirely new campaigns, and most surprising of all, it was free! Well, kinda. It's interesting, the price of the game has steadily increased based on the amount of content that's been added, but if you already owned the game, then you got all of it. That is way better than having to buy a plethora of DLC in my opinion. Whether it was digitally, physically, whatever, it was all yours. I bought my digital Wii U version back when the game was still $15, and sure enough, I'm good. So we now have 4 unique campaigns. That is a whole lot to go through, so why not we just rapid fire through these now, shall we? All these years later, the original campaign is still a blast. The story is pretty cliche, with a pseudo save the princess angle and 8 specifically themed bad guys standing in your way, Mega Man style, before taking out the big bad meanie, the Enchantress, but quite frankly, this all fits perfectly. If you're gonna go for the retro aesthetic, you may as well embrace it. Shovel Knight as a character is so enjoyable to play as, and the shovel itself is such a cool multi-purpose weapon. Digging not only digs in dirt mounds, but it attacks as well, and then you have the DuckTales styled pogo jump that is incredibly satisfying, especially in boss battles if you do a constant swap of bouncing and close combat. It's awesome. The level designs are also super clever, encouraging a mastery of platforming as well as exploration to find a bunch of collectibles. And a special nod to the soundtrack too, it is fantastic stuff. I mean, basically everything Jake Kaufman has ever composed is incredible, so that much was a given, but all these years later, this soundtrack is still a jam from start to finish. If anything though, as I replayed the campaign, I realized I'm not much of a fan of the relic system. Having all of these extra items to tinker with so you don't always rely on your shovel sounds really good on paper, but in practice, aside from contextual uses like the dust knuckles occasionally, I only ever end up using the fishing rod to take out items from underground and the flare rod for long distance attacks. That's it. Do you remember the war horn? Probably not! Whenever you're required to use them, like in the extra challenge mode, they're definitely a lot of fun to use, but in the core adventure, I'm probably in the minority on this, honestly. This idea is in all of the other campaigns as well, so clearly someone has to like them, but overall, a damn good retro-styled adventure. Now, if only we can go through the same exact quest, but with a slightly worse character. Well, one of these had to be the least interesting one. Taking place parallel to the Shovel of Hope story, it turns out that Plague Knight is plotting his own scheme to create a potion of unlimited power requiring essence from the other members of the Order of No Quarter, as well as Shovel Knight. And he partners with Mona, a simple minigame provider in the previous campaign, to get the job done. And this is the best part of these extra campaigns, by the way. The extra lore added to these seemingly minor characters is fantastic, and it only gets better from here. As a playable character, Plague Knight is kinda neat. He uses potions as his main attack, as well as a means to platform, and as you progress, you're able to gain access to potion modifiers that alter how they're thrown, how long it takes for them to explode, and even what happens when they explode. Similar to the relic system though, I feel like the game really isn't built around using most of these options. You sort of have extra choices for the sake of it. When you find one you like, there's really no incentive to change things up unless you're bored. Though the actual relic equivalent, the Arcanas, are a bit more useful, since your range of movement is a bit more reckless, so these ended up being more handy than I anticipated. But the big problem here is the level design is damn near exactly the same as Shovel Knight's mode. There are some differences to take advantage of Plague Knight's extra platforming abilities, but for the most part, yeah, this is exactly the same. And maybe it's because I played these two campaigns back to back, but Plague of Shadows kind of felt like a chore, and at the very least, a not as good version of Shovel of Hope. Where this mode shines though are the more major changes. Like you can't go into the main town like Shovel Knight can. You're evil after all, they can't let that happen. That mask is definitely a bit scary, you don't want to scare the kiddies. So instead, you explore the underground potionarium, definitely fitting the mood of what the character is based on. And after you go through the Explodatorium, the stage where Plague Knight is originally from, well, now you fight Shovel Knight. That's pretty cool. The story takes place at the same time. This makes perfect sense. The final boss is totally different too, so that was nice. It definitely ends on a good note. Plague of Shadows isn't bad, but compared to the others, it's pretty disappointing. Usually playing as a new character with not much different, a la Luigi in Super Mario Galaxy or Proto Man in Mega Man 9, never really interested me in the first place. Plague Knight and Mona as a couple though, absolutely adorable, credit where credit is due, like my favorite thing about this entire campaign. They should be together for the rest of their lives. Okay, and now we move on to the really good stuff. After being disappointed with Plague Knight's campaign, I really didn't know what to expect with Specter Knight, and after playing it through multiple times, oh boy, this one is fantastic. Taking place before the events of Shovel of Hope, Specter Knight is sent out to recruit the members for the Enchantress's Order of No Quarter. That alone is a pretty cool premise, but throughout the entire story, we get to see snippets of Specter's life before dying. It turns out his real name is actually Donovan, and he used to adventure with his partner, Luan. And after a battle that left him wounded and his partner dead, the Enchantress offers to save him if he goes and recruits those warriors. It's a surprisingly deep and kinda depressing plot coming from the previous two campaigns, and there are plenty of elements that I still don't want to spoil, because if you haven't played Specter of Torment yet, this entire thing is full of surprises. Right off the bat, the playstyle is very different. Specter Knight can wall jump, break blocks under his feet by jumping, slash diagonally across a ton of different obstacles, and boy can this man ever skate. Must have grown up playing Tony Hawk or something, man, because this guy can go. Because of these drastic changes, this means we also have drastically different level designs. They happen in the same locations for sure, but everything within them has completely changed. A bunch of new enemies were introduced, boss patterns have been modified, and the stage music has all been remixed. The soundtrack was pretty good before, I already said as much, but man, these Specter of Torment remixes are way better than the originals in my opinion. For example, the new theme for King Knight's stage is a lot cheerier, since he hasn't been corrupted by joining the Order yet. Awesome touch. This campaign is a whole lot better if you have already played the previous ones, because every time you think you know what's gonna happen, they flipped the script on you, and it's a breath of fresh air from start to finish. It is so much fun. I can't recommend this enough. This alone sells the entirety of Shovel Knight in my opinion. The extra items, the relic equivalents, this time the curios, are still not too exciting for me, but regardless, by far the best campaign yet. Now if we can just get a full-blown Specter Knight skateboard game, that'd be pretty awesome. Rounding things off here, we have King Knight's mode, King of Cards, which only took, like, forever to release. Yacht Club, holy moly, they made sure to polish the hell out of this before releasing it to the world. It took them years. While Specter of Torment told a darker and more serious plot, King of Cards, yeah, this doesn't do that. Man, you can't even see his face, and you can tell King is the happiest he has ever been. The events of this story also take place prior to Shovel of Hope. King Knight looks to be the best at a card game called Joustus. And yeah, that's it. Ah, damn, man, that mood whiplash really gets you if you're not paying attention. Holy cow. That's like really the entire plot. He just wants to be the best at a card game, and he travels across the land to beat others who say they are the best at the card game. That's it. That's amazing. And there's like this entire extra plot point where King Pridemore keeps hitting on your mom, and King Knight can't stand it. Oh man, that is hilarious. And there's also a cry button. It just be like that sometimes, you know? The platforming side of things take place in much smaller levels than in previous campaigns, and not all of them end in bosses. That's actually a really big difference from the previous modes. And your main form of attack is a Wario Land inspired shoulder charge, followed by a twirl to attack from above. And anything that's a reference to Wario Land, quite frankly, gets an A+ in my book. It is such a simple mechanic, but the way it's used throughout the entire lengthier campaign is quite frankly impressive. Better than any other mechanic in the entire Shovel Knight universe. And there's also like this bubble item that you gain later on into the adventure, and boy, did it ever come in handy way more than I would like to admit. I used it a lot. I really wasn't too great with this twirling mechanic, to be honest. And similar to Specter Knight's mode, there are so many twists and turns that pop up if you're familiar with the original adventure. For example, partway into the game, there is a fight with Specter Knight, where you fight against basically the playable version of that character, and then halfway through the battle, he transforms into the standard boss version. It made for a really cool encounter. Stuff like this happens throughout the entire story, and it was really cool every single time. And of course we have Game 2, Joustus, a deceptively simple card game revolved around pushing tiles around a board to gain control of gems. There's a whole deck building system here where you're able to secure more cards by either buying them or beating opponents, and there's even a cheating system, which also came in handy a bunch, once again like the bubble mechanic, way more than I would like to admit. I really don't think I was that good at this game. Gimmicks are getting introduced the further you get into the adventure, getting more powerful cards was constantly pretty exciting. It was a surprisingly engaging card game. And on the bright side, if you're not a fan, you can skip it. Of course, for completion purposes, and if you want to get some extra money, doing these card battles could be helpful, but it is certainly not required. It also makes a full playthrough substantially longer. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing is entirely up to you. I tend to prefer darker tones when it comes to my storytelling, and also that skating mechanic can't be beat, so overall, not as good as Specter of Torment, but certainly takes the number 2 spot when we compare each of the campaigns. Oh, you thought we were done? Because hey, screw it, they promised it 5 years ago you gotta put in a practically full-on Super Smash Bros. Equivalent taking place in the Shovel Knight universe. Of course! You got a bunch of different stages, battle types, and playable characters exclusive to this mode, and a ton of unlockables. It's more so impressive than anything else. I'm not really a huge fan of it, honestly. I don't think Shovel Knight's playstyle really lends itself super well to something like this, but I can very much appreciate knowing that this game now has some relatively solid multiplayer offerings as well. Oh my god, and that doesn't even go over all of the minor things they added over the years as well. There's so much! There's a series of challenges for each campaign, as well as a New Game Plus mode that slightly modifies mechanics, a pretty humorous body swap mode, a bunch of cheat codes to mess around with. One of them changes every instance of the words knight and shovel with butt. That's amazing. Exclusive Kratos and Battletoads boss battles for the PlayStation and Xbox versions. The PS4's controller light bar changes colors when the in-game light flashes, the only time I ever thought the light bar was a good idea. And of course we have the amiibo. I love these. By using them in the, of course, Nintendo versions, you'll unlock co-op play for Shovel of Hope, a customizable version of Shovel Knight, which is really cool, and by meeting up with Madam Meeber, incredible name, she provides awesome looking armor for each playable knight, extra challenge stages, and an adorable little fairy companion that mimics all of your actions and tries to help out whenever it can. This is probably the best part of the entire treasure trove. Just look at them go! Having an exclusive Nintendo boss fight would have been pretty cool to compare with the PS4 and Xbox ones, but really now, I can hardly complain with the rest of the stuff given to Nintendo players. I think the incredible legacy Shovel Knight paved is undeniable. You can say what you will about the content of the treasure trove itself, but this simple little indie game has gone far above and beyond what people anticipated all those years ago. And simply by promising so much in its initial Kickstarter, and actually being able to follow through with it in a way that didn't piss off the entire fanbase, is something that Yacht Club Games should really be incredibly proud of. I don't know how so many developers get that part wrong, but damn it, they did it right. With great level design, fantastic music, a charming set of characters, and such a clever way of sprinkling in lore amongst 4 individual campaigns, being able to mess with the player's expectations in the process, man, it's so damn cool. There is just so much to dig through in this treasure trove, but this simply isn't quantity over quality. Time and effort was spent making sure that nearly every single element of this package is as polished as humanly possible. Yeah, Plague of Shadows isn't that great, but that is hardly a blemish on an otherwise fantastic platformer that easily belongs up there with some of the biggest and most influential indie games to ever release. And the future looks really bright too. Shovel Knight Dig looks super fun, there's a board game in the works, that's gonna be really cool, and no doubt Yacht Club is cooking up something that'll surely make a big splash, and you can bet that I will be there day one to see what groundbreaking game comes next. Couldn't help myself. Shovel Knight is by far the best example of an indie game success story. I feel like there should be no questions about it. And even though the world is filled nowadays with a ton of side-scrolling, pixelated, retro-inspired titles, Shovel Knight remains the cream of the crop. The fact that it made the PS4 light bar seem like a good idea, that's enough of an achievement on its own. Okay, but if we can actually get that Specter Knight skateboarding game, that would legitimately be amazing.